What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Quality Talks podcast. I'm your host, Jude, coming at you with a bite-sized episode today where I'm going to talk to you all about leadership and why we as leaders shouldn't expect recognition. That may seem a little bit of a weird take, but I'm going to explain throughout this episode why I think that and how my view on that has changed over time. So let's get into this conversation then. So the reason I wanted to do this, have this conversation with you, is because this came up in a coaching session I was doing with one of my coachees recently, who has who's in her first leadership role, and obviously with any new leadership role come a lot of learnings, and it's really difficult to understand how well you're doing. Obviously there's a confidence thing there, not having done the role before. You're always trying to find your way, figure things out on the fly. Obviously that's where the coaching and mentoring comes in, and having those conversations. But one of the things we got talking about, and sort of the piece of advice that I shared with this person, was that as you become more accustomed to being in a leadership role, you'll very quickly realize that with leadership rarely comes sort of the recognition that you would expect. And in a day and age where we as individuals are really like in this position of like immediate gratification, right? Immediate recognition. We post something on social media and like, is anybody liking it? Is anybody sharing it? Is anybody commenting on it? And it becomes this sort of just behavior that I think that we've just generally started getting into the habit of, where recognition is a thing where somebody directly reacts to what you're doing and responds in a certain way, or recognizes you directly for what you've achieved or what you've said or something along those lines. But for me, leadership isn't about that at all. Leadership is much more about being comfortable with not getting the recognition. Now that can be, difficult, because like I say, if you're new into a role, you need recognition to understand that you're doing well. So if you're not getting that recognition, because in my mind, the recognition is already there, right? You're already in a leadership role. That's recognizing that you're able and capable of doing that, whether that be a recent promotion, whether that be a new role that you've stepped into. For me, that is recognition enough. I'm in this role. I've been recognized I'm able to do this role. The reward is the role itself. The reward is leadership. The reward is the privilege of leading other people, whether that be in a direct way or an individual contributor way. So if we shouldn't be expecting recognition, how then do we understand if we're doing well? Okay, so I think for me, this comes from shifting our mindset very much from I need to be recognized as an individual, to the recognition flowing through your team and those that you lead or those that you coach. And think of it from a different perspective. So for me, a lot of the wins that I've had as, in a position of leadership aren't wins that have directly been for me. They've been through other people. So if you think about, if you've been in a leadership role for some time, or leadership roles, plural, for some time, think about what successes have you seen others achieve, whereby you have had some sort of influence on them to achieve what they've ultimately gone on to do. Whether that be, they've been promoted, whether that be, they've left the business and gone on to greater things. I've had people that are now in leadership roles that honestly I would say are way better than me. right? I don't think that I'm the best leader in the world, and none of us are, because we're always learning, right? And I think that's the key thing. We always need to learn. So when you see others doing well that you've helped shape, help guide, help develop over time, that for me is the recognition. I don't need that person to then call me out and say, oh, this person that I had as a leader way back when, they were great, this and the other. No, for me, I understand that I contributed to that in some way. Not completely. There'll be other people that have contributed to that success of that person, no more so than themselves. Okay. However, for me, that is the real recognition that I need, if that makes sense. So thinking about how we do that, obviously, looking at how we build relationships with people, we obviously need to think about culturally, how do we set up the environment for people to succeed. These are all things that we can start looking at as success and recognition of the work that we are doing. It's almost like being an invisible leader. We want to be leaders that aren't seen or heard, but our work that we do is reflective through those that we lead. So when you're thinking about seeking feedback, obviously you want to seek feedback based on what you've been doing, but maybe come at it from a slightly different way and sort of think about, as a leader, what have I achieved to enable others, right? Rather than, as a leader, what have I achieved for me? Okay, yes, there'll be things that you've done as a leader that ultimately, reward yourself, but the primary goal for me, and always will be, is the enablement, support, and success of other people. So so setting up sort of environments where people feel safe, people feel heard, giving them that autonomy, giving them that empowerment, all with support and guidance, because autonomy and empowerment without support and guidance is just negligence in my mind. And then just sort of watching people succeed. You often find that if you're somebody that coaches people, the best conversations that generally happen are the ones that get forgotten. They won't even realize the difference they've made, and you won't even realize the difference that it's made until sort of like that reflection, and you see these building blocks being created that drive that person's improvement, development, ultimate success, how they change, all this sort of thing. So I think, from a leadership perspective, you need to be very, very mindful of these things. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about those we lead. And that is the primary measure of success, primary measure of recognition for me, in my mind. I'm not one to ever take the credit. I will always, put that spotlight onto somebody else or onto a wider group of people. And I think that's the right way to be. If I'm honest, we shouldn't be the ones standing on that stage taking the applause. We should be the ones that are creating that stage, putting people, in that spotlight and applauding them. That's really what we're there to do. So trying not to have this competitive nature as a leader where you're competing against other leaders and that sort of thing. For me, that's just not healthy. Generally, that's not healthy anyway when you're competing with others. But reflecting on some of the best leaders I've had, they've been very much that same sort of mold, whereby they provide you with the tools, they provide you with the guidance, they provide you with the support, and then they get out of your way, and they basically just allow you to develop as an individual. They'll provide the support that you need when you need it, but they're invisible, really, and they don't take the credit. They don't take the success. Now, I've seen leaders that very much do that. They completely stand there and take all the credit for the work that their team has done, or the improvements that have been made. And in a lot of cases, those people are actually the people the leaders that don't actually have that sort of impact. They're not the ones that are influencing. They're not the ones that are setting up that environment. The team, in fact, are doing that despite them, not because of them. So I think, I just wanted to kind of bring this to the forefront of your mind, whether you are in a leadership role, whether you're looking to move into leadership. It is quite a big mindset shift, and it can be very lonely. I'm not going to lie, it can be very lonely. And sometimes I sit back and I think, oh, it would just be really nice if somebody acknowledged the work that I'm doing, right? And I think it was last year, somebody that I coach and mentor, and I've known for some time, messaged me, and I think it was on one of our coaching sessions, and told me that they'd actually put me forward for a leadership award at Eurostar conference, which for me was just like mind blowing. I don't take praise and I don't take recognition very well, so it was such a humbling thing and gesture, and it didn't bother me that I didn't win. It was more a case of somebody actually felt that they wanted to do that. It wasn't something that I expected. It wasn't something that I asked for. It's not why I do these things. So to have that was very humbling, and it was a lovely thing for somebody to do. But actually, I think that mattered more than if I was to have won. Winning things like that don't really mean anything. It's kind of like having the acknowledgement of those that you coach, you mentor, you lead, and just a smile, just a thank you, just anything like that is actually recognition enough, rather than a promotion, rather than a pay rise, rather than an award that somebody can flash and or put on a LinkedIn post or something like that. So yeah, I just this is a very short episode to bring to you all, because I just wanted to sort of express my feelings around this. So yeah, just think about these things when you're in those roles. Think about how you can be recognized, but be recognized through others. Don't seek recognition. Seek feedback. Feedback is good. We should all seek feedback. Don't seek recognition. Don't allow yourself to be consumed by the fact that you're not getting recognition, because, as I say, as leaders, the recognition that comes directly to us often diminishes over time. Right? We'll get a lot of the if something goes wrong, that's where we have to burden. Right? We have to put that onto our shoulders. We have to protect our teams, and we have to ensure that things move forward, in the right way. But when things go well, that isn't really our stage, right? That is the stage for the team. That is the stage for individuals, and we need to make sure that we are all very, very comfortable with creating that environment. And if you're not, maybe question whether leadership is actually for you, especially people leadership. You can be in an IC role, and obviously as an individual contributor, it's slightly different maybe. But again, even then, I feel like you're having to influence the things that you're doing through people. You're having to bring people on a journey. You're having to still mentor, coach, train people, even as an individual contributor in a leadership level role. So everything I kind of have said basically still holds true. So you just need to keep that in mind. It can be a lonely place. peer-to-peer recognition is always good, sort of just sharing with if you see somebody in a leadership role doing something good, call it out, and I think peer-to-peer, as I mentioned, peer-to-peer sort of recognition is actually more important than sort of, more senior recognition, promotions, all that sort of thing. So yeah, just wanted to bring that to you all. I'll be really interested to get your thoughts on what you think, if you are in a leadership role, or whether you're thinking about stepping into a leadership role. What are your thoughts? How do you perceive recognition as a leader? Do you expect it? Do you seek it? Do you is what you do on a day-to-day basis for recognition, to show how good you are as an individual, or is what you do on a day-to-day basis to enable, lift, and enable your team to shine and be the ones in the spotlight, taking that praise, taking that credit, and ultimately getting the reward for doing so. So just ask yourselves those questions. But that's it. Very short, very sweet, just like me. Share your thoughts in the comments. Please share the episode. Please share the podcast in general with your friends, colleagues. And more importantly, of course, join us next time on another episode of Quality Talks podcast. Take care for now.